A 7-year-old girl sat alone on cold concrete steps as the sun set over an empty school parking lot. Forgotten. Again. The clock showed 4:47 p.m. Her stepmom was over an hour late, but then came the sound, a rolling thunder that shook the ground beneath her feet. 100 Hells Angels motorcycles filled the parking lot, their leather vests and roaring engines surrounding the abandoned child. The leader, a massive man called Bear, knelt before her with storm-cloud eyes and asked one simple question. "How long have you been waiting, darling?" What happened next would prove that family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when everyone else forgets you exist. The afternoon sun beat down on the asphalt parking lot of Riverside Elementary School, turning it into a shimmering pool of heat. It was 4:47 p.m. on a Friday in late September 1985, and the schoolyard had emptied nearly an hour ago. 7-year-old Emma Patterson sat on the concrete steps near the main entrance, her small hands gripping the straps of her faded pink backpack. The metal zipper was warm against her fingertips. She had counted 18 cars leaving the parking lot since Mrs. Henderson, the school secretary, had walked past with a sympathetic smile and a promise that, "Someone will be here soon, sweetheart." And that was 43 minutes ago. Emma knew because she had been watching the big clock through the glass doors, its black hands moving with agonizing slowness. The elementary school sat on the eastern edge of Riverside County, where suburban sprawl met dusty rural roads. Behind the school, the San Bernardino Mountains rose like sleeping giants in the distance, their peaks still holding patches of last winter's snow. The neighborhood was working class, modest ranch homes with chain-link fences, pickup trucks in driveways, and lawns that ranged from manicured to neglected, depending on which street you walked down. Emma's white sandals had a scuff mark on the left toe. She rubbed it with her thumb, trying to make it disappear. Her father had bought her these shoes 3 months ago, before everything changed, before the wedding, before Cheryl. Cheryl wasn't mean exactly, not in the obvious ways that Emma had seen in movies where stepmothers were witches or villains. Cheryl was worse. She was forgetful, dismissive, present but absent. She would look right through Emma as if the little girl were made of glass, her attention always somewhere else, on her phone, on the television, on anything except the child her new husband had brought into the marriage. "Your daddy works hard," Cheryl would say when Emma asked for help with homework or wanted to show her a drawing. "Don't bother him with little things." Little things. That's what Emma had become. A little thing to be managed, fed when remembered, and mostly ignored. The marriage had happened fast. 6 months after Emma's mother died in a car accident on Interstate 215, her father, Robert Patterson, had met Cheryl at a company barbecue. Cheryl was 10 years younger, blonde, with a laugh that sounded like wind chimes. Robert, drowning in grief and single parenthood, had grabbed onto her like a life raft. They were married by Christmas. Emma understood, in the way children understand things they can't quite articulate, that her father was trying to rebuild something broken. But in the rebuilding, she had become a leftover piece that didn't quite fit the new picture. A hot breeze kicked up dust devils in the parking lot. Emma watched them spin and dissipate. Her stomach growled. She had eaten her sandwich at lunch, peanut butter and jelly that Cheryl had slapped together that morning without cutting off the crusts. Emma didn't like crusts, but she had learned not to complain. The school doors behind her were locked now. Mr. Jameson, the janitor, had checked on her 20 minutes ago, his keys jangling on his belt. "Still no ride, little one?" he had asked, his weathered face creasing with concern. Emma had shaken her head. He had offered to call someone, but Emma didn't know who to call. Her father was at work. He managed inventory at a warehouse in San Bernardino and wouldn't be home until 6. Cheryl was supposed to pick her up. Cheryl had promised, but Cheryl forgot. It wasn't the first time. 2 weeks ago, Emma had waited 35 minutes before Cheryl showed up, reeking of cigarette smoke and offering no apology, just an irritated, "Get in the car, Emma, I have errands to run." Last month, Cheryl had forgotten to pack Emma a lunch 3 days in a row. The school nurse had quietly given Emma sandwiches from the extra lunch program, asking no questions, but writing something in a file that Emma couldn't see. Emma kicked her feet against the concrete step. The sound echoed in the empty schoolyard. A mockingbird called from the chain-link fence that separated the playground from the street. She wondered if birds ever got forgotten. If baby birds ever waited in their nests for a mother who didn't come back. The sound of engines broke through her thoughts. Not the soft purr of sedans and minivans, but something deeper, rumbling, powerful. Emma looked up and saw them coming down Magnolia Avenue like a rolling storm, motorcycles, dozens of them. The sound grew louder, a mechanical thunder that vibrated in her chest. They turned into the school parking lot, one after another, filling the empty spaces with chrome and leather and noise. Emma counted them in her head, 10, 20, 30, more. They kept coming. The riders wore black vests with patches and emblems she didn't understand. Some had long beards, others had bandanas tied around their heads, many had tattoos covering their arms like intricate sleeves of art and symbols. Emma should have been frightened. She had seen movies where men like these were the bad guys, outlaws and troublemakers, but as she sat there on those concrete steps, forgotten by the person who was supposed to care for her, she felt something else, curiosity. And something deeper, a strange, inexplicable sense that whatever was about to happen was meant to happen. The lead motorcycle pulled up directly in front of the steps. The rider was a massive man, easily 6'4", with shoulders that seemed to span half the width of his bike. His beard was thick and grey, braided in places. His vest had patches that read Hell's Angels and California, and a skull with wings. His eyes, however, were what struck Emma. They were blue-grey, like storm clouds, but they held a gentleness that seemed at odds with his intimidating appearance. He killed the engine. The sudden silence, broken only by the ticking of cooling metal and the murmur of other riders dismounting, felt almost sacred. "Hey there, little darling," the man said, his voice a deep rumble that matched his motorcycle's engine. "You waiting for someone?" Emma nodded, finding her voice. "My stepmom. She was supposed to pick me up at 3:30. The man glanced at his watch, a heavy silver thing on his wrist. "It's almost 5, sweetheart. That's a long time to wait." Other riders had gathered now, forming a loose semicircle around the steps. Emma counted them. There were at least 100, maybe more. Men and women, though mostly men, all wearing the same patches, all looking at her with expressions that ranged from concern to barely concealed anger. "What's your name?" the big man asked, kneeling down so he was closer to her eye level. Emma Patterson." "Well, Emma Patterson. My name is Marcus, but folks call me Bear." "And these fine people here," he gestured to the crowd of bikers, "these are my brothers and sisters. We're part of a club that takes care of things, especially when it comes to kids who need looking after." Emma felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back. She'd learned not to cry. Crying made Cheryl more irritated, made her father more tired. A woman pushed through the crowd, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, her leather vest adorned with patches that read "Property of Hell's Angels" and "California." She had kind eyes and a scar above her left eyebrow. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice softer than Bear's, but no less serious, "has this happened before? Being forgotten, I mean." Emma hesitated. Loyalty to family, even the broken, painful kind, ran deep. But sitting there, surrounded by 100 strangers who seemed to care more in 5 minutes than Cheryl had in 5 months, Emma found herself nodding. "Sometimes," she whispered. The woman's jaw tightened. She looked at Bear, and something passed between them, an understanding, a decision made without words. "Do you know your stepmom's phone number?" Bear asked. Emma recited it from memory. Bear pulled out a cell phone, one of those new brick-sized Motorola models that only important people seem to carry, and dialed. Emma could hear it ringing, once, twice, 3 times. Then Cheryl's voice, annoyed even in the recorded message, "You've reached Cheryl. Leave a message." Bear didn't leave a message. He hung up and looked at the assembled riders. "Brothers," he said, his voice carrying across the parking lot, "we got ourselves a situation here. A little girl who's been forgotten. Neglected, and that doesn't sit right with me. Does it sit right with any of you?" A chorus of no and hell no rippled through the crowd. "So here's what we're gonna do," Bear continued. "We're gonna wait right here with Emma until her stepmom shows up. And when she does, we're gonna have a conversation about responsibility, about what it means to be family, about how you don't forget a child. Ever." Emma watched as the bikers settled in, some sitting on their motorcycles, others on the curb, a few standing in small groups talking in low voices. One of them, a younger guy with a red bandana and a goatee, walked to his saddlebag and pulled out a candy bar. He handed it to Emma with a wink. "Bet you're hungry, huh?" She was. She took the candy bar gratefully and whispered, "Thank you." The sun continued its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Emma sat on those concrete steps, no longer alone, surrounded by 100 Hell's Angels who had decided that one forgotten little girl mattered more than wherever they had been going. And for the first time in 5 months, Emma Patterson felt protected. Cheryl's white Honda Accord turned into the school parking lot at 5:23 p.m., 31 minutes after the Hells Angels had arrived. Emma saw her stepmom's face through the windshield, the moment Cheryl realized what she was driving into. Her expression shifted from irritated distraction to wide-eyed panic in the space of a heartbeat. The Honda's brakes squealed as Cheryl stopped abruptly, still 50 feet from where Emma sat, surrounded by motorcycles and leather-clad bikers. For a long moment, Cheryl didn't move. She just sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring at the sea of motorcycles between her and the school entrance. Bear stood up from where he'd been sitting on his bike. He was even more imposing at full height, his shadow stretching long across the asphalt. He raised one hand, not threatening, but commanding, and gestured for Cheryl to approach. Slowly, reluctantly, Cheryl put the car in park and opened the door. She was wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweater, her blonde hair pulled into a messy ponytail. She had the look of someone who had been lounging at home, not someone who had been doing anything important enough to forget a child for 2 hours. "Emma," Cheryl called out, her voice thin and uncertain. "Come here, sweetie. Time to go home." Emma started to stand, but Bear's hand, gentle but firm, rested on her shoulder. "Hold on there, darling," he said softly, then louder to Cheryl. "Ma'am, we need to have a conversation first." Cheryl stopped walking when she was about 20 feet away, as if the wall of bikers represented a physical barrier she couldn't cross. I don't know who you people are, but that's my daughter, and I need to take her home." "Stepdaughter," corrected the woman with the scar. Emma had learned her name was Rita. "And the question isn't who we are. The question is where the hell you've been for the last 2 hours while a 7-year-old child sat alone in an empty school parking lot." Cheryl's face flushed red. It's not... I lost track of time. These things happen. It's none of your business." "That's where you're wrong," Bear said, his voice calm but carrying an edge like steel wrapped in velvet. "When a child is in need, it becomes everybody's business, especially ours." He gestured to the patches on his vest, the Death Head logo, the California Rocker, the MC designation. "We're Hell's Angels. You might have heard of us. And one of the things we do, one of the things we take real serious, is protecting children. Kids who can't protect themselves. Kids who depend on adults to do right by them." Another biker stepped forward, an older man, maybe in his 60s, with a white beard and weathered skin that spoke of decades in the California sun. His name was Johnny, and Emma had heard him tell Bear that he had 3 grandchildren of his own. "I raised 4 kids," Johnny said to Cheryl. 4 kids, and I never once forgot to pick them up. You know why? Because being a parent, step or otherwise, means you put that child first. Always. No exceptions. Cheryl's panic was morphing into defensive anger. "You don't know anything about my life. You don't know how hard it is. Robert works all the time and I'm stuck." She caught herself, but not quickly enough. "Stuck with Emma?" Rita finished, her voice dangerously quiet. "Is that what you were going to say?" The silence that followed was suffocating. Even the breeze seemed to still. Emma felt her chest tighten. She had known, on some level, that Cheryl resented her. But hearing it almost spoken aloud, in front of all these people, made it real in a way it hadn't been before. Bear knelt down next to Emma again. "Sweetheart, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. Has she hurt you? Physically, I mean?" Emma shook her head. "No, she just forgets me sometimes, and she doesn't like when I talk too much or ask for things." Bear's jaw clenched. He stood and faced Cheryl again. "Here's what's gonna happen. You're gonna take Emma home. You're gonna feed her a proper dinner, and you're gonna think real hard about whether you're capable of being what this little girl needs. Because if we hear, and we will hear, that she's being forgotten again, neglected again, made to feel like she doesn't matter, we're coming back. And next time, we won't be this polite." A ripple of agreement moved through the assembled bikers. Some nodded. Others made sounds of affirmation. It wasn't a threat of violence. Not exactly. It was something deeper. A promise. A covenant. The tribe had spoken, and the tribe protected its own, even if its own was a little girl they'd just met. Cheryl looked like she wanted to argue, to assert some kind of authority, but she was outnumbered and outmatched. She swallowed hard and nodded. "Fine, Emma, let's go." Emma picked up her backpack. As she walked toward Cheryl's car, Rita stepped into her path and knelt down, pressing something into Emma's hand. It was a business card with a phone number written in neat handwriting. "You keep this," Rita said quietly. "If you ever need help, and I mean ever, you call that number, day or night. Someone will answer. Someone will come." You understand? Emma nodded, clutching the card like a talisman. And this, Bear said, handing Emma a small patch, a miniature version of the Hells Angels Death Head logo. This means you're under our protection. You keep that somewhere safe. It means something. It means you're not alone. Emma felt tears welling up again, but this time she let them fall. Thank you, she whispered. As she walked to the Honda, the wall of bikers parted for her, creating a path. But they didn't leave. They stayed there, engines silent, watching as Cheryl opened the car door and Emma climbed into the back seat. The drive home was silent. Cheryl's hands shook on the steering wheel. Whether from fear or anger, Emma couldn't tell. They lived on Sycamore Street, a quiet cul-de-sac about 3 miles from the school. The house was a single-story ranch with beige siding and a lawn that needed mowing. Emma's father's truck wasn't in the driveway yet. He wouldn't be home for another 45 minutes. Inside, the house was cluttered but not dirty, magazines on the coffee table, Cheryl's shoes by the door, a coffee mug with lipstick stains on the rim sitting on the kitchen counter. Cheryl went straight to the phone and dialed. Emma could hear her father's voice on the other end, tinny and distant. "Robert, you need to come home. Now, there's been a situation." Emma went to her room, a small space at the end of the hall that still had the lavender paint her mother had chosen 3 years ago. Her mother's picture sat on the nightstand, a 5x7 in a silver frame. Emma picked it up and studied her mother's face. The same dark hair Emma had, the same green eyes, the same small nose. "I miss you, Mama," Emma whispered. She pulled out the business card Rita had given her and the small patch from Bear. She folded them carefully and put them in her jewelry box, a wooden thing with a ballerina that spun when you opened the lid. It had been her mother's when she was a little girl. Downstairs, she could hear Cheryl pacing, her voice rising and falling as she talked on the phone. Emma changed out of her school clothes into pajamas, soft flannel pants and an oversized T-shirt that had belonged to her father. Then she climbed into bed, even though it was barely 6 o'clock. She thought about the bikers, about Bear's kind eyes and Rita's fierce protectiveness, about 100 strangers who had cared enough to stay, to wait, to stand between her and neglect. The world, she realized, was more complicated than she had thought. The people who looked scary weren't always dangerous, and the people who looked safe weren't always kind. Her father came home 20 minutes later. Emma could hear his heavy footsteps on the stairs, could hear the low murmur of conversation in the kitchen. Then, louder, his voice raised in a way she rarely heard. "You forgot her? For 2 hours? What the hell, Cheryl?" Emma pulled the covers over her head and tried to make herself small. She hated when they fought. It always felt like her fault, even when it wasn't. But tonight, cocooned in her mother's lavender room with the memory of 100 motorcycles roaring to life in her honor, Emma felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The fallout came swiftly and from multiple directions. By Monday morning, the story of the Hells Angels and the forgotten girl had spread through Riverside Elementary like wildfire. Emma walked into school to find clusters of students whispering, teachers exchanging meaningful glances, and Principal Howard standing by the front entrance with his arms crossed, watching her arrive. Her father had driven her that morning, a rare occurrence given his work schedule, and had walked her all the way to her classroom, his hand firmly on her shoulder like an anchor. "You have a good day, sweetheart," he had said, kissing the top of her head. And if anyone gives you trouble, you tell me. Understand? Emma had nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure what kind of trouble he meant. In Mrs. Collins's second-grade classroom, the stares were less subtle. Emma took her seat at the back table, where she usually sat with 3 other students, Madison, Tyler, and Andrew. Madison's mother was on the PTA and volunteered in the library twice a week. She had perfect blonde pigtails and always had the newest Lisa Frank folders. "My mum says those motorcycle people are dangerous," Madison announced, loud enough for half the class to hear. "She says they're criminals and your parents should call the police." Emma felt her face grow hot. "They helped me. They scared my mum when she drove past the school," Tyler added, not meanly but matter-of-factly. "She said she didn't know what was happening and thought maybe there was a robbery." Mrs. Collins, a woman in her mid-40s with reading glasses on a beaded chain, clapped her hands for attention. "All right, class, let's settle down. Take out your spelling workbooks, please." But the whispers didn't stop. At recess, Emma found herself alone on the swing set while groups of students played tetherball and foursquare nearby. She wasn't being actively excluded. No one had told her she couldn't play, but there was an invisible barrier now. A wariness that hadn't existed before. Only one person approached. His name was Marcus Chen, a quiet boy who sat in the front row and always had his homework done perfectly. He was small for his age, with black-framed glasses and a Dragon Ball Z t-shirt. "Hey," he said, sitting on the swing next to Emma's. "That was pretty cool, what happened on Friday." Emma glanced at him, suspicious of kindness after a morning of stares. "You think so?" "Yeah. I mean, 100 motorcycles? That's like something from a movie." He kicked at the gravel beneath his swing. "My grandpa rides a motorcycle, not with a club or anything, just by himself. He's cool. He's teaching me about engines." Emma smiled. A small, hesitant thing. "The man who talked to my stepmom, his name was Bear. He was really tall." "Bear," Marcus repeated, testing the name. "That's a good name for a biker." They swung in comfortable silence for a while, the rhythmic creak of the chains providing a soothing counterpoint to the chaos of the playground. Then Marcus said, "My mom left us last year. Went to San Francisco with her boyfriend and didn't come back. So it's just me and my dad and my grandpa now. People talk about that too, like it's weird or sad, but it's just life, you know?" Emma did know. For the first time since her mother died, she felt understood by someone her own age. "My mum died," she said quietly. "Car accident." "That sucks." "Yeah." They didn't talk more about it. They didn't need to. Sometimes understanding doesn't require words. Back in the classroom after lunch, Principal Howard's secretary appeared at the door and spoke quietly to Mrs. Collins. Mrs. Collins nodded and looked at Emma. "Emma, Principal Howard would like to see you in his office." The walk down the hallway felt like walking to execution. Emma's heart pounded. Had she done something wrong? Was she in trouble because of the bikers? Principal Howard's office smelled like coffee and old books. He was a thin man with a receding hairline and wire-rimmed glasses, known for being fair, but strict. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Have a seat, Emma." She sat, her feet not quite reaching the floor. "First of all," Principal Howard began, leaning back in his chair, "I want you to know that you're not in trouble. But I do need to ask you some questions about what happened Friday afternoon. Is that okay?" Emma nodded. The school secretary, Mrs. Henderson, filed a report about how long you waited for your ride. And then there was the Incident with the motorcycle club. He folded his hands on his desk. I need to understand what happened from your perspective. Did those men threaten you or make you feel unsafe in any way? No, Emma said quickly. They were nice. They gave me a candy bar and waited with me. And your stepmother, Cheryl, is it? How often does she forget to pick you up? Emma hesitated. This was the dangerous question, the one that could make things worse at home. Sometimes, she said carefully, but she comes eventually. Principal Howard made a note on a pad of paper. Emma, if you're ever in a situation where you feel unsafe or neglected, you need to tell a trusted adult. Me, Mrs. Collins, the school counselor, any of us. We're here to help. Do you understand? Yes, sir. Good. He smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. You can go back to class now. That afternoon, when the final bell rang, Emma waited nervously by the front entrance. Would Cheryl be on time, or would there be another incident, another round of judgment and whispers? At 3:35 p.m., 5 minutes after dismissal, Cheryl's Honda pulled into the parking lot. Emma let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding and hurried to the car. Cheryl didn't speak during the drive home. Her jaw was tight, her fingers drumming an agitated rhythm on the steering wheel. When they pulled into the driveway, she finally broke the silence. Your father and I had a long talk this weekend. Emma waited, anxiety coiling in her stomach. He thinks I need to try harder, with you. Cheryl's voice was flat, devoid of warmth. So I'm going to try. But you need to understand something, Emma. This, she gestured vaguely, this isn't easy for me. I didn't sign up to be a mother. I thought Robert and I would have time to be just us before worrying about kids. The words hit like physical blows. Emma stared at her lap, willing herself not to cry. But you're here, Cheryl continued, and I'm stuck with the situation, so we're both going to have to make the best of it. Inside the house, Cheryl went straight to the bedroom and closed the door. Emma made herself a snack, crackers with peanut butter, and went to her room. She pulled out the business card Rita had given her and stared at the number. She didn't call, not yet, but knowing she could, knowing that somewhere out there 100 people in leather vests would answer if she needed them, made the loneliness bearable. 3 weeks passed. October arrived with cooler temperatures and the promise of Halloween. Cheryl kept her word in the most minimal way possible. She picked Emma up on time, fed her dinner, made sure she did homework. But there was no warmth, no affection, no attempt at connection. Emma was a checklist item to be managed, not a child to be loved. Robert worked longer hours, seemingly oblivious to the coldness in his own home. Or maybe he simply didn't want to see it. Grief and denial often walk hand in hand. Then, on a Wednesday afternoon in mid-October, everything changed again. Emma was sitting on the front porch steps doing homework, a math worksheet on addition, when the sound of motorcycles rumbled down Sycamore Street. It wasn't the full 100 from before, but it was enough. 15 motorcycles, maybe 20, turning into the cul-de-sac and parking along the curb in front of Emma's house. Bear was leading them again, his massive frame unmistakable even from a distance. Rita was there too, along with Johnny and several others Emma recognized from that Friday afternoon. Cheryl burst out of the house, her face pale. "What are you doing here? You can't just show up at my house." Bear dismounted slowly, deliberately, and walked up the driveway. "We're doing a welfare check, Mom, making sure Emma's being taken care of proper. She's fine. You can see she's fine. Now leave." "With all due respect," Rita said, stepping forward, "we'll determine that ourselves." Emma stood up, her math worksheet forgotten. Bear looked at her, his storm cloud eyes scanning her face, her posture, her demeanor with the practiced assessment of someone who had seen neglect in its many forms. "How you doing, darling? Everything okay?" Emma wanted to lie, wanted to say everything was fine to avoid conflict. But something in Bear's gaze, a genuine concern that expected honesty, made the truth spill out. "She does what she's supposed to, but she doesn't like me. She told me she didn't sign up to be a mother." The effect was immediate. Rita's expression hardened into something dangerous. Johnny muttered a curse under his breath. Bear's hands, massive and scarred from years of mechanical work and harder living, clenched into fists at his sides. "That true?" Bear asked Cheryl, his voice deceptively calm. That's not... She's taking it out of context," Cheryl stammered. "I don't think she is," Rita said. "I think you said exactly what Emma's telling us. And that's a problem." A neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez from 2 houses down, had come out onto her porch, watching the scene with open curiosity. Then another neighbor, Mr. Patterson, no relation to Emma's family despite the shared surname, emerged from his garage. Within minutes, half the cul-de-sac had an audience. "You're making a scene," Cheryl hissed. "Good," Bear replied. "Maybe it's time there was a scene. Maybe it's time people paid attention to what's happening in this house." One of the younger bikers, a man named Danny with tribal tattoos covering his arms, spoke up. "I grew up with a stepmom like you, resented every minute I existed. You know what that does to a kid? It breaks something inside, makes them think they're not worth loving, that they're a burden." "I went through the foster system," another biker added, a woman named Cheryl, ironically sharing Emma's stepmom's name, with short purple hair and multiple piercings. 15 different homes before I aged out. You know what I learned? That biology doesn't make family, care does, showing up does, and you, lady, aren't doing either." Cheryl looked around desperately as if searching for an escape route. "You can't do this. This is harassment. I'll call the police." "Go ahead," Bear said, pulling out his own phone and holding it out. "Call them. We'll wait right here. And when they arrive, we'll explain why we're concerned about a child's welfare. We'll show them the documentation we've been keeping." Documentation. Cheryl's voice cracked. Rita pulled out a small notebook from her vest pocket. October 3rd. Emma waited 15 minutes past pickup time. October 7th, 22 minutes. October 10th. Emma was sent to school with no lunch. The nurse provided one. October 15th. Parent-teacher conferences. You didn't show up. Mrs. Collins called and left 2 messages. No response. Emma's eyes widened. They had been watching, keeping track, protecting her from a distance. "We've also been talking to your neighbors," Johnny added, gesturing to the growing audience. "Mrs. Rodriguez here mentioned that she often sees Emma playing alone outside while you're inside watching TV. Mr. Patterson has noticed that Emma walks herself to the school bus stop every morning because you don't come out with her." Mrs. Rodriguez nodded, stepping forward. "I've been worried about that little girl for months, but I didn't know what to do, who to tell." "Well, now you know," Bear said. "You tell us, and we make sure something changes." Cheryl's defiance crumbled. She looked at the bikers, the neighbors, the weight of collective judgment bearing down on her. "What do you want from me?" "We want you to be honest," Rita said, her voice softer now but no less firm. "If you can't love Emma, if you genuinely can't be what she needs, then say so. Don't torture this kid by making her feel like a burden every single day." Let her father find a solution that actually works for her. And if you can try, really try, then we'll help, Bear added. We're not here to destroy your family. We're here to make sure Emma has one. The statement hung in the air, powerful in its simplicity. Emma felt tears streaming down her face, though she wasn't sure when they'd started. Cheryl looked at Emma, really looked at her, maybe for the first time since the wedding. What she saw must have triggered something. Guilt, shame, maybe even a flicker of compassion, because her shoulders sagged, and she said quietly, "I don't know if I can be what she needs." "Then we figure out what comes next," Bear said. "Together." Robert's truck turned into the cul-de-sac at that moment, arriving home early for reasons unknown. He pulled into the driveway and stepped out, taking in the scene with growing confusion and alarm. "What the hell is going on?" Bear walked over and extended his hand. "Mr. Patterson, we need to talk about your daughter and what she needs, because what she's got right now ain't working." Robert looked at Emma, at Cheryl, at the assembled bikers and neighbors. His face, usually so carefully controlled, cracked with emotion, confusion, anger, fear, and underneath it all, the dawning realization that he had been blind to his own daughter's suffering. "All right," he said, his voice rough. "Let's talk." The conversation that followed was the hardest Emma had ever witnessed. They all gathered in the living room. Robert, Cheryl, Bear, Rita and Johnny, while the other bikers remained outside, a visible presence that made running from the truth impossible. Emma sat on the stairs, technically out of sight, but close enough to hear every word. "Your daughter has been neglected," Bear began, his tone matter-of-fact but not cruel. "Not in the legal sense. She's fed, clothed and housed. But emotionally, psychologically, she's drowning, and you haven't noticed." "I work 12-hour days," Robert protested. "I'm doing everything I can to keep this family afloat." "But you're not seeing what's right in front of you," Rita interrupted. "Cheryl doesn't want to be Emma's mother, and Emma feels it every single day." Cheryl's face was blotchy with tears. "I tried, I really did, but I can't. I don't know how to connect with her. She reminds me that I'm not what Robert really wants. He wants his dead wife back, and I'm just the replacement." The rawness of the admission shocked everyone into silence. Robert stared at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. "Cheryl, that's not—" "It is," she said, wiping her eyes. "You compare me to her all the time. The way she cooked, the way she decorated, the way she was with Emma. I can't compete with a ghost, Robert, and I'm tired of trying." Johnny, the oldest of the bikers, spoke up. "This isn't about blame. Both of you are hurting, and Emma's caught in the middle. The question is, what are you gonna do about it?" Robert put his head in his hands. When he looked up, his eyes were red. "I don't know. I thought getting married again would fix things, would give Emma stability. But I didn't think about whether Cheryl and Emma were right for each other. I just needed to not be alone." "That's honest," Bear said, "and honesty is where solutions start." Rita looked at Cheryl. "Do you want to be in this marriage? Not for Robert's sake, but for your own?" Cheryl was quiet for a long moment. Then she shook her head. "I don't think so. I love Robert, or I thought I did. But this life, instant motherhood, trying to fill shoes I was never meant to wear, it's killing me." The truth, once spoken, couldn't be unspoken. Robert looked devastated but also relieved, as if a weight he'd been carrying without acknowledging had finally been named. "Then we need to talk about what's best for Emma," Bear said, "because that little girl has lost her mother, been given a stepmother who can't love her, and is watching her father work himself to exhaustion. She deserves better. I have a cousin in Oregon, Robert said slowly. My mother's sister's daughter. She's been asking to spend time with Emma for months, but I kept putting her off. She has 2 kids of her own, similar ages to Emma. She was close with Emma's mother. Would Emma be happy there? Rita asked. I think so, Robert admitted, but I can't just send my daughter away. It wouldn't be sending her away, Johnny said gently. It would be giving her a home where she's wanted, where she can heal, you can visit, you can be her father, but maybe not her primary caretaker right now, while you get your own life sorted. Emma listened from the stairs, her heart a tangled mess of fear and hope. Oregon. She barely remembered her cousin Sarah, but she remembered her mother talking about her, about Sarah's warmth, her laughter, her big rambling house near the coast. The conversation continued for another hour, with Bear and his crew serving as unlikely mediators. By the end, a plan had emerged. Cheryl and Robert would separate, giving each other space to figure out what they really wanted. Emma would go stay with cousin Sarah in Oregon for the school year, with regular visits from Robert. They would reassess in the summer. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And honesty, Emma was learning, was the foundation of everything real. That night, after the bikers had left and Cheryl had gone to stay with a friend, Robert came to Emma's room. He sat on the edge of her bed, and for the first time in months, he really looked at his daughter. I'm sorry, he said, his voice breaking. I've been so lost in my own pain that I didn't see yours. Your mother would be so disappointed in me. Emma reached out and took his hand. Mama would want you to be happy. She'd want you to be happy too, Robert said, and you haven't been, so we're going to fix that, okay? Okay. He hugged her then, a real hug, tight and desperate and full of love that had been buried under grief. When he pulled back, he said, those bikers, they really care about you. I don't understand it, but I'm grateful for it. They saw me when no one else did, Emma said simply. The next day, Bear and Rita returned, this time without the full club, but with a proposition. We want to stay in Emma's life, Bear said to Robert. Check in on her, make sure she's doing okay. With your permission, of course. You want to be her, what? Guardian angels? Robert asked, a hint of humor breaking through his exhaustion. Something like that, Rita said with a smile. We take care of our own, and Emma's one of ours now. Over the next month, the plan unfolded. Cheryl moved out officially, and the divorce papers were filed, amicable as these things go, with both parties acknowledging it had been a mistake from the start. Emma's belongings were packed into boxes. Bear and several club members helped load Robert's truck for the drive to Oregon. Cousin Sarah turned out to be exactly what Emma needed, a woman in her early 40s with frizzy brown hair, a loud laugh, and a house that smelled like cinnamon and chaos. Her 2 kids, Jordan and Macy, were 8 and 10, and within hours of Emma's arrival, they had pulled her into a board game war that lasted until bedtime. You're going to be okay here, Sarah told Emma that first night, tucking her into a bed in a room that had been prepared with care, purple walls, a bookshelf full of young adult novels, and a window overlooking the Pacific Ocean in the distance. You're safe, you're wanted, and you're loved. Emma believed her. Robert visited every other weekend, the 3-hour drive becoming a ritual of healing. He brought updates about his therapy, about rebuilding his life, about learning to be the father Emma deserved. and the bikers kept their promise. Once a month, Bear and Rita made the trip to Oregon, roaring up to Sarah's house on their motorcycles and taking Emma out for ice cream or to the beach. They never missed a visit, never forgot. On Emma's 8th birthday, 6 months after the day they'd found her waiting on those school steps, the entire Riverside County chapter of the Hells Angels showed up at Sarah's house. All 100 of them. They filled the street with motorcycles and leather and noise. They brought presents, a new bike, books, a leather jacket with a patch that read, "Protected by Angels." Emma stood in the yard, surrounded by family. Sarah, Jordan, Macy, her father who had driven up for the party, Mrs. Rodriguez and Mr. Patterson, who had made the trip from California, and 100 bikers who had decided one forgotten girl mattered. Bear lifted her onto his shoulders so she could see the whole gathering. "Happy birthday, darling," he said. "You're never gonna be forgotten again, you understand? Never." Emma looked out at the sea of faces, people from every walk of life, bound together by a simple creed: protect the innocent, stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves, and never let anyone feel alone. "I understand," she said. That night, as fireworks burst over the Oregon coast, a gift from the club, Emma sat on the porch steps with her father. It was the same position she'd been in that day at school, but everything else had changed. She was no longer alone, no longer forgotten. "Do you think Mama can see us?" Emma asked. Robert looked up at the sky, at the colorful explosions of light. "I think so. And I think she sent those angels to find you when I couldn't." Emma smiled. She touched the patch on her new jacket. The death head with wings, the symbol that meant she was protected, valued and loved. Family, she had learned, wasn't about blood. It wasn't about legal documents or shared last names. It was about who showed up, who stayed. Who fought for you when you couldn't fight for yourself. And Emma Patterson, the forgotten girl from Riverside Elementary, had found hers. In the distance, Bear revved his motorcycle, the engines roar like a promise and a prayer all at once. The other bikers followed suit, a symphony of thunder that echoed across the coastal hills. Emma closed her eyes and listened, and for the first time since her mother died, she felt complete.